Hello and welcome to Competitive Crunch. My name is Spade and today I'm going to be talking about Pokemon Bank and the impact it's going to have on the competitive Pokemon scene. And we're going to start the episode with some bad news because the release of Pokemon Bank and the Poke Transporter has been postponed. And I'm on the official Nintendo website, nintendo.com. I will leave a link in the description for this announcement so you can check it out yourself if you so desire. But originally, the application was supposed to be released today, December 27th, here in Europe and also in the United States, and I believe in some few other places as well. But scrap all that, because the whole thing has been postponed, because a couple of days ago, as the application came out in Japan, basically every Japanese person went online at the same time, and you can imagine that didn't do well with Nintendo servers, and they kinda crashed, and now nobody's having Pokemon Bank. Or at least that's what they're saying right here, because they're having some network issues. So you can imagine Pokemon is a crazy thing in Japan, and everybody going online at the same time is certainly going to cause some issues. Although I'm kinda surprised, because they were doing so well with the X and Y. Of course, the original release of X and Y was much bigger than this random application. So I would have imagined, since they survived so well with the initial release of the actual games, they would have been doing just fine with this application, but apparently that was not the case, even though they had a couple months to prepare too. And personally, I haven't had any issues with Nintendo Wi-Fi when playing Pokemon X and Y, especially during like the first couple months when it was the craziest thing ever, and it still is, and so far no issues. But then with this, unfortunately, the whole release is postponed. Who knows if we're gonna be getting this like next year perhaps. But then again, the good news is that New Year is right around the corner, so it's not the end of the world. But it's just that, you know, when a big company like Nintendo promises something and then they don't deliver, of course you kinda have to give them the stinky eye. But yeah, not the end of the world. And then we're gonna move to the official topic of the day, which is the impact that the Pokemon Bank is going to have soon, hopefully soon as it gets released. I don't know if there's going to be any changes within a few hours when I'm going to wait and upload this, but who knows, I'm going to keep you guys posted on that. I can always post some links in the description and put some annotation if something changes within a few hours or so. But here we are on Cerebi, and they have this nice list of all the unobtainable Pokemon within the games X and Y. So obviously, if you have been playing on Pokemon Showdown, where they have a server set up, the so-called Pokebank OU tier, you have access to all the unreleased Pokemon, and obviously a lot of them have a huge impact on the metagame, because there's a bunch of good unobtainable Pokemon that we don't have access to at the moment, but through Pokemon Bank we can finally have them and use them in the competitive Pokemon scene. And obviously they will have, again, that huge impact. And besides that, there are a bunch of move tutor moves that we don't have access to, like how would a superpowered scissor sound like? Now currently it needs to rely on Brick Break, and I would personally much rather have superpower. So that right there is a good thing. And then something like Conkeldurr, you know, it doesn't have elemental punches, and especially Ice Punch would be a thing for it, so it can muscle its way through things like Gliscor and Landorus and Dragonite and such things. And a bunch of other Pokemon. Getting like Stealth Rocks. Currently there aren't too many Stealth Rockers. Everybody's just using Tyranitar and like Tyrantrum or something like that. But now with Pokemon Bank, we're going to have access to more Stealth Rockers. And speaking of Stealth Rockers and a way how to deal with them, we currently do not have too many Defog users. Because Defog got buffed up in this generation, as we all know. But we currently don't have too many Defog users. Now, of course, with the Pokemon Bank, there's going to be like 90 users of Defog if you think about the ones from the Generation 4, because you can move them to Gen 5 and then to Gen 6 from the Gen 5 games. So we're going to have a bunch of Defog users. Of course, there's only a handful of them that are actually good. Honestly, as I went through Defog users, there's like perhaps like 10 or 12 actually decently, moderately good users of Defog, which is a bit unfortunate. But currently, we only have like Crobat. So a definite boost to defog users. And a bunch of other things. You know, I could go all day about all the different moves that every single Pokemon gets and how that would impact everything. But that would take a year, so let's not do that. Let's not waste any more time with that. But also another thing that I do have to mention is that a bunch of Pokemon may have base stat changes. We know things like Scolipede and Raichu got base stat changes like Scolipede plus 10 attack, Raichu plus 10 speed, Alakazam plus 10 special defense, and so on and so forth. Lots of Pokemon got base stat changes, and we don't know about these Pokemon, the current ones that are not unobtainable in the games. Perhaps they have had some base stat changes, and also, besides those moves to their moves, they may be able to learn some new or old moves that they just weren't able to learn in the past, but they now can in Generation 6. Because, for example, Entei is apparently rumored to have Sacred Fire. People have been seeing that in the Pokemon Maison with Sacred Fire, and that could be kind of a cool thing. And who knows what other moves all these Pokemon could potentially learn now in Generation 6. We don't know until we get to experiment with that. So, a lot of potential that Pokemon Bank could have that we potentially don't even know of. But today, let's go through this list of the most interesting Pokemon here. And the first thing that pops into my mind, after disregarding all the internet memes and jokes, all those aside, the first interesting Pokemon here, competitively speaking of course, would be Mew. And Mew, of course, a really versatile Pokemon. Last generation, it wasn't really the greatest thing, because the fact is, the thing with in Gen 5 and even in Gen 6 is that Mew is kind of like outclassed by everything. There are lots of Pokemon that do its job a lot better than Mew can do. It can do many things, but there are Pokemon that can do its job a lot better. But however, of course, the thing with Mew is that it's so unpredictable because it can do so many things. But the pure Psychic type is kind of just bad for Mew because, you know, it's not good defensively or offensively. But still, the fact is that Mew is able to learn so many different moves. Besides Miracle, it's one of the highest move pools that Pokemon have. So it can do a lot of things. It can be a supporter, it can be a sweeper on the special side, on the physical side. It can do a bunch of things. That is what makes Mew really unpredictable, and that is where Mew's hidden potential lies. So having Mew on the field is definitely interesting thing. Also, Mew can learn Defog on Generation 4, so Mew could be one of the potential Defog users. And then I guess, you know, if we talk about Porygon, well, mainly it's evolutions. Porygon 2 is one of the better Eviolite walls, and especially in this generation with Permasand gone, it could be slightly better. It could. And Porygon Z, you know, doing its sweeper by sweeping things, but I think having Porygon 2 is going to be pretty cool. Weezing is a solid, like, lower tier wall, but, you know, enough of that. Let's move on. We got the Johto starters here. That's pretty cool. We can have access to them. I'm mostly looking for Feraligatr. If it would actually finally get access to Sheer Force, then it could actually rise up a tier. Back in Gen 5 it was like an RU Pokemon, but I don't know, has it any potential to be a current underused Pokemon whenever that tier comes about? But Sheer Force definitely could make a difference for Feraligatr. It's a really nice ability, but we'll just have to wait and see if Feraligatr gets released with this Hidden Dream World ability. Misdreavus, that's a nice lower tier ghost Pokemon, or Misdreavus if we talk about that. But Misdreavus being more of a Eviolite wall, and then Misdreavus, a Nasty Blood Sweeper, or Calm Mind, Sub Calm Mind and all that, but lower tier Pokemon. Not the biggest thing. There's the Porygon 2 that I talked about. Then there's Legendary Dogs. Or I'm sure somebody will get offended by the fact that I'm calling them Legendary Dogs. Spade, they are more feline or canine or blah 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 blah. But I'm calling them dogs. And you have to take into account Entei, Raikou, Suicune, as much as you love them, they're not your sisters. So you don't need to defend their honors. They're not gonna get offended. And it's part of my childhood. In my childhood, they were legendary dogs. And so be it, I will still call them legendary dogs. Even though I do agree they're more feline. But they're monsters, they're creatures, they're beasts, they're whatever. But these guys, they could have a small impact on the metagame, but I still don't think, unless they get like base stat buffs, which I really doubt because they are already legendary Pokemon, I think they're pretty much going to remain the same, kind of a lower tier Pokemon. Although one thing nice for Suicune is that because of the old sleep mechanics returning, it can perform its job as a sleep talker slightly better. It's more reliable to use sleep talk now as it was in the past generation, as the sleep turns just kept resetting. Now they don't, so Suicune is at least slightly better, but in the OU tier it needs to deal with all the bulky grass types like Ferrothorn and Mega Venusaur now and all sorts of things, so yeah, that's going to be a problem for Suicune. But in the lower tiers, perhaps it's going to be slightly better. And Entei potentially getting that Sacred Fire could be pretty cool. Don't know about Raikou, but it was in the previous generation, it was a solid underused special sweeper with Calm Mind and Choice Scarf and Specs. A really good Pokemon, and I think it will still continue to be one in the mid-card. It's going to be a solid mid. All these, I would imagine, being solid mid-card Pokemon, and they perhaps still a bit there lower. But I think spamming Sacred Fire could be just really awesome, getting that burn. Because Scald burns every time, and Sacred Fire has a 50% chance to burn, so that's huge. Then we have Lugia and Ho-Oh. You can finally have access to these Pokemon. Multi-scale Lugia, absolutely disgusting. Regenerator Ho-Oh, I've been trying that out a bit in Ubers on Showdown, and it's proven itself to be a great Pokemon, as it still was, but still not, I'm not that much of an Ubers player, so I'm not going to be talking about these two too much, but in the Ubers metagame, they will definitely have an impact. And then we got good old Celebi. I believe it's also distributed by some random events. Now with the release of Pokemon Bank, of course, you know, we don't know how that works out, but I know if you can currently just download it, perhaps. But it comes with a new move that is just like with False, which is just like False Swipe, but with a different name, so awesome. But Celebi definitely sturdy grass type, another Pokemon that Suicune has trouble getting past, especially with the special defense, the special defensive ones. So I would imagine Celebi being a huge part of the OU tier, because it's a really solid Pokemon. It kind of proved itself in the last generation. It kind of started as a UU Pokemon, but then it kind of just found its place. Also kind of, well, the thing is, I don't know, because Celebi was a bulky grass Pokemon, and it could deal with a lot of the rain teams that were always around in Gen 5, because obviously Perma-Rain, and now that the Perma-Rain is gone, perhaps that will kind of hurt Celebi's usage, but it's still a solid special wall. It has that nasty plot, so it can do some sweeping. It can perform as a bulky sweeper, or I guess even offensive spread would work. But Celebi certainly has its options to work as a sweeper and as a great supporter for the team. It can do multiple different things, which makes it a really good Pokemon. But then we have the Hoenn starters, right? Blaziken, of course, was already released through an event, but in case you missed that, now you have another chance to get your hands on Blaziken, so that's the thing. Swampert is a cool kid, of course, Mudkip. But Swampert, I don't know if it's going to be outclassed by, like, Gastro still. Honestly, like, in this generation, there's no Perma-Rain, so Gastro may not have place in this metagame as much. So maybe Swampert having access to Stealth Rocks, it may make its return, and I think a bit better, higher offenses. So we shall see what's going to happen with that. Sceptile, going to be probably still a lower tier Pokemon, I would imagine, unless it gets some awesome new special moves that we don't know about. But Blaziken, of course, in the Ubers metagame. And, well, yeah, it's already out, but, you know, now you can transport it yourself if you missed it and you don't have a friend who could trade you one. So, that's the thing. But anyways, then we got Claydol, Milotic, lower tier walls, I guess. Then we got the Regis. Regis still kind of got nerfed with the steel types, but it still has 10... No, Ferrothorn has 10 freaking resistance. I don't know how many pure steel type. I can't think of on top of my mind. But I think Registeel is still going to be a solid, like, mid-card tier wall. Like, I would imagine it will find its place in the UU tier. And then with the Regirock, I don't know much. It's a shame that the Regice can't really abuse its Ice Body ability. Don't know if that was ever even released. But, yeah, both of these kind of lower tier Pokemon. Regi's still kind of upper mid card, I'd say. But then we get into some good stuff here. Got the Lottie twins. Oh, yes. And, minor spoilers right now. You're free to skip ahead like a minute or so if you want to. Something about Latios and Latias if you don't want to know. Something that could potentially happen to them in the future. So skip ahead now. And so, getting to the point now, with all the spoiler alerts aside. Apparently these two are getting a Mega Evolution that looks like an airplane. But the fact that these things are getting a Mega Evolution definitely going to have a huge impact. And I think what is more interesting is that is Soul Dew going to get released? Especially if these Pokemon, if there's going to be a future event with the Lottie twins getting their Mega Evolution, is the Soul Dew going to get released at all in this generation? Does it exist in this generation? The fact is, with Pokemon Bank, you cannot transfer items, so it's not like you could import the Soul Dew from the past generations. That will not work out at all. So how does the thing actually work out? Will Soul Dew be forever gone, and will that be kind of just replaced with a Mega Evolution that these Pokemon are getting, or what? But that's definitely something that we'll just have to wait and see. But on that note, getting back to the swing of things, Latios and Latios definitely going to have a huge impact on the metagame. Latios is known to spam that Draco Meteor, although it now kind of needs to watch out for all sorts of especially bulky fairy types like Florges and I guess even Adamatis. Well, Sylveon mainly, I guess. And it's kind of cool that something like God of War, it's actually kind of like a hard counter now, because it's immune to Draco Meteor now, and it resists Psyshock, and it's overall like really especially bulky. So something like Surf or HP Fire doesn't really hurt it too much. So it actually does a good job in walling the Lottie twins. So that's pretty cool. On top of that, it can retaliate with like Moonblast or Hyper Voice. Boosted by the Megaform's Pixelate ability, so that's pretty cool. And it might be a bit tougher for the Lottie twins to do in the current OU tier, but I'm sure they will do still just fine. They were really dangerous Pokemon in the previous generation, spamming Draco Meteor so freely because nothing was immune to it, and now at least we have some immunity, so I think it's gonna be a bit easier to deal with the Lottie twins. Of course, they can still trick those Pokemon, except for Mega Gardevoir. It cannot be tricked because of the Mega Stone. So Mega Gardevoir perhaps should be used more in the Pokemon Bank tier to deal with the Lottie twins. Perhaps. But definitely really solid OU Pokemon both. Latias being the bulkier sweeper usually. But anyways, Kyogre, Groudon, Rayquaza, the Weather Trio, of course they're going to have their own impact in the Ubers metagame. I'm not the expert again on the Ubers, so I'm not going to be talking about that too much. But I know how the Weather War is going to be working out there, because, you know, obviously Weather was nerfed with these two, but I'm sure they will still have an impact on the Uber scene, without a doubt. And then we got Jirachi. Definitely a solid OU Pokemon, but the problem is, again, the Steel nerf, because in the past, Jirachi had 2 weaknesses, and now it has 4. So besides the Fire and the Ground weakness, it is now weak to Ghost and Dark. And on that note, I'm kind of thinking that the Scarf Raji is going to be the Raji of this generation. And we're not going to be seeing too much of the specially defensive one. And also Jirachi could benefit from the rain too. And now there's no perma-rain, although that's not the biggest thing for Raji. But, you know, slightly hurts it. But still, the fact that it has now 4 weaknesses, and the fact that Gengar, it can no longer wall Gengar, I think is going to be a huge deal for it. And on that note, in my opinion, the specially defensive Rachi doesn't work as well as it did in Generation 5, which kind of hurts it. And because Steel typing is now slightly better offensively, I would imagine the Scarfed Ironhead Spammer would become more popular in this current metagame, or the future one. Or depending on if you have played that Pokemon Showdown metagame with Pokemon Bank. So that's the thing. But that's my take on Raichu. Then we got Deoxys. Deoxys Attack and Deoxys Normal, of course, are already on Smogon's ban list. But that leaves us with Deoxys Speed and Deoxys Defense. And I think Deoxys Speed especially is going to be a great asset for Hyper Offense. Because you just get quickly a couple layers of hazards up, and then you let this thing die. And Deoxys Speed can so easily do that because it basically outspeeds everything in the metagame because it's just so fast. So you get off a couple hazard layers, and then you go to town with the rest of your team. And then you just don't even give your opponent an opportunity to go for that defog. And of course, this thing has Taunt, which can shut down defog. So that's also a thing. And it also applies to its bulkier brother, Deoxys Defense. But I think even with the defog in the field, in the scene now being a better move, I think Deoxys brothers are going to be great assets for Hyper Offense, and I believe Smogon is already thinking about suspecting Deoxys Speed. And of course the problem with Deoxys brothers usually is that they have multitude of support moves and offensive moves. They are extremely difficult to counter. If you take the time to scout if they have a coverage move, they will just end up spreading all their entry hazards. And if you don't take the time to scout it, you may just end up dying to one of its great coverage moves, which includes something like Fire Punch or even HP Fire, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Psycho Boost, Super Power. So if you think you're safe with something like Tyranitar, think again when you get destroyed by a Super Power. So it has all these multitude of moves, plus there's like Magic Code, so it can bounce back the opposing taunts and stuff like that, especially for Deoxys Defense. And like also, if you think you're safe with like Magic Bounce Zatu or Espeon, it can just go for the skill swap. That is actually a thing, which is really cool. But it has options to basically counter all of the things that would, you know, somewhat even be possible to check it. So that's kind of an issue with the Deoxys brothers. Although I think Absol, Mega Absol, does a pretty decent job, because, you know, it has the Magic Bounce in the Mega form, and it's a Dark type, so it can retaliate hard with like something like Night Slash. So that's kind of a cool thing, but I don't think Absol alone is gonna be enough to stop the wrath of the Deoxys brothers in this metagame. I would at least imagine the Deoxys Speed getting banned whenever it's gonna get suspect tested. But anyways, then we got the Sinnoh starters. I think the most interesting one being Infernape, the good old choice band user, mixed sweeper, can use Sword Dance. It has, I believe it also has Nasty Plot, I think so. It's just not that really common, but Scarf Band, mixed, it can do it all when it comes to sweeping. And now with Blazing and Gone, you're going to be looking at Infernape if you want a firefighting starter to be using in your competitive team. But Infernape has a bunch of great offensive moves, firefighting coverage coupled with U-turn, and a bunch of other moves that it does have access to. I would imagine this Pokemon still being a solid OU tier Mon. And then Empoleon, I guess the Steel nerf kinda hurts it, but Empoleon actually could be one of the potential defog users as well. So perhaps if you just give it defog as opposed to Stealthrox, or I guess you could be running them on the same set, but it's kind of redundant, so you could. But still, Empoleon being a bulky Pokemon, Steel Water type, still being pretty good, even though with the Steel nerf. You could see Empoleon with in a different role using defog in this generation. Perhaps. Then we got some lower tier mons here. Yes, Lopunny can do that switcheroo with the Assault Vest. That's like the only new gimmick that it has going on for itself. But I don't think it's gonna make it too popular or anything. Then Miss Mages. Yeah, that's gonna be in the lower tiers. I already kind of talked about that. There's the Porygon Z. Then we got the Pixie brothers or sisters or whatever you want to be calling them. I still kind of think these are gonna be kind of in the lower tier. Azelf, most likely kinda highest in the tier, probably gonna be still a UU Pokemon because of the solid offensive capabilities. 125 attack, special attack, 115 speed is definitely a great asset for it. Definitely get Nasty Plot too, so you can do some sweeping with that. But it's just that I guess the psychic typing is just kind of not the greatest one, so that's why I go back to the underused here in the previous generation, and also the introduction of the team preview, because Azelf was before it was used as a dedicated Stealth Rock lead with Explosion. Explosion also got nerfed, so those couple of things kind of hurt it in the previous generation. And I still kind of think it's the same thing for Azelf in this generation as well. And Mesprit and Uxie, kind of a lower tier Pokemon. Calm Mind is kind of a thing with both of them. They can do that, or Stealth Rock support. But they're still kind of mediocre Pokemon, so there's that. And then we got Dialga, Palkia, certainly going to have an impact in the Uber's metagame. I'm not sure how much the Dialga is going to get hurt by the Steel nerf there, but I would imagine it still being a solid Uber's wall. I really love the bulk up set. I was using that a few times in the previous generation games, but that's the thing. And again, I don't know much about Uber, so we move on to my favorite, Heatran. Oh yes, good old Heatran. Still nerf. Honestly, like, I've seen it quite a bit in the Pokebank OU, and right there, I think because everybody's using Genesect, a lot of people are using Heatran to counter it, because Heatran is really the only legit counter that Genesect has, unless it's running like HB Ground that nobody is running. So that's the thing. But Heatran being one of the, let's just say, better checks in case somebody is running that HP Ground. Better checks to Genesect, and it's still a really solid Pokemon. It can provide your team with Stealth Rocks, and it has really high special attack, and it can do some really great support for your team. Especially defensive Heatran is still pretty cool, and it can spread some status below its Toxic, and it can retaliate hard with like Magma Storm, Fire Blast. And it has Dragon Pulse too, and I guess Flash Cannon may have some use now with the fairies around, so that's the thing too. But Heatran, really great Pokemon. It also has that balloon which it can still abuse. But multitude of resistances, and especially with the fairy types, it has 4 times resistance to fairies, so that's a pretty cool thing for Heatran to have, and something that I don't think any other Pokemon have, so that's the thing. Heatran still, I think, is as good as it was in Generation 5. And then Regigigas, still a gimmick. That doesn't work because of its horrible ability. Giratina is going to have its place in the Uber's metagame for sure. Don't know how much the Ghost typing is going to be helping it out to deal with like Steel types. Now it can do that. So that's a nice thing for Giratina. Then we got Cresselia. Kind of outclassed by Reuniclus, having the Magic Guard, and basically also better offensive capabilities, so there is that. Although, one nice thing for Cresselia is that now that there is no Perma Weather, its Moonlight is no longer that useless. It's slightly more reliable now. Of course, Tyranitar is everywhere in OU tier, so I don't think Cresselia is gonna find its place there, but still, it's a thing. And then we got Fione and Manaphy. Fione never had a big impact on the metagame because it's kind of this random base 80 Pokemon gimmick in the lower tiers. But then Manaphy. Manaphy definitely has it has already seen quite a bit in the Pokemon Bank OU tier. It has Tailgo, giving it +3 special attack in 1 turn. It can also Calm Mind, although the Rain nerf, it kind of hurt it, but Manaphy could actually be used as a solid rain supporter with Damp Rock, and you have the Hydration Rest there. So it could be using now with no Perma Rain, it could be one of the better supporters for Rain, but definitely a nasty, not the Nasty Blood, it's better than Nasty Blood, the Tail Glow +3. Definitely a really solid wall breaker. It's honestly really difficult. A few times I've been up against the Manaphy. It's so bulky that it doesn't die to a one hit, and then after one turn it's at +3, and suddenly you have nothing to take a hit from it. So it's definitely a problem, but the fact that there's no Perma Rain means that Manaphy is not as good as it was in the little time it was OU back in Generation 5, but definitely a difficult Pokemon to switch into. You got something like, I guess Ferrothorn would do a pretty good job of walling it, although I'm sure +3 Ice Beam will still do a great chunk. And then I guess Rotom would do a decent job. But then again, Manaphy has access to Energy Balls, so screw that. It's gonna be a really dangerous Pokemon, Manaphy, still. Most certainly. But, you know, it's not the fastest thing, so you can still revenge kill it. But then again, it's really bulky, so you gotta have some really strong Pokemon to even revenge kill it. And it's really difficult to switch into Manaphy. It's difficult to switch into Manaphy directly, so that's gonna be definitely an issue with it. But the Permarain, the lack of it, definitely hurts it. Then we got Darkrai, certainly going to have an impact in the Ubers. A bit easier time with no Steel types walling it so easily. So that's the thing, good thing going for the Darkrai. But certainly it will be as dangerous as it has been in the past in the Ubers. Then we got the good old Shaman, kind of a upper mid-card tier, UU tier, grass type wall. What do I really have to say about it? The Seed Flare spamming is kind of nice for it, so it can get those special defense drops, and also has HP Fire, which I guess got nerfed slightly, but it has that option and nerf power for coverage, so, or Hidden Power Eyes even, I guess. But I'm certain it will find its place in the lower tiers again, most likely in the UU. And then Arceus. Oh yes, we can have Arceus Fairy finally, legibly, because I'm sure people have already found their pixie place. So you put that, slap that thing on Arceus, and you got yourself freaking Arceus Fairy, which is in the Ubers where there are a bunch of dragons, and then you have suddenly an Arceus that is immune to all those dragon type moves. So that's pretty cool. But of course, Arceus can't do pretty much anything. It can be any type. It has, like, much like Mew, it has a huge move pool to do pretty much anything it wants, from supporting to being an offensive sweeper. It can be physical, special, it can be a physical or special wall. You know, with Swords Dance, you got the Extreme Killer, still extremely dangerous, and you got the Calm Mind Sweepers, Mono Attackers, all sorts of different types. Oh man, it can do anything. It's gonna have a huge impact again in the Ubers metagame for sure. Then another one of my favorites, Victini, of course. Gotta say, I really want to see how Recreate looks in Generation 6. I bet it's gonna be sick. Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed by a lot of moves, because they moved into this 3D thing. They, in my opinion, they weren't able to make a lot of the moves as fancy as you'd have expected, like from Generation 5. They, in Gen 5, I feel like Game Freak had a lot more freedom when it came to the animation, because obviously they were two-dimensional. But now, as we're moved to 3D, obviously that's a bit more difficult. Although there are some like really cool moves too in Generation 6, but in my opinion, overall, Gen 5 had cooler move animations. But something like Power Whip, for example, from Gen 6, I believe, I think it's one of my personal favorites. How cool that looks like with the side-scrolling animation and the whips coming from the ground and the green background, and then the black bars rising and coming from the top and the below, and that's a really cool animation. But I want to see Recreate, basically. But Victini, I think it will still be an upper mid-card UU tier Pokemon, but unless it gets some cool moves, which kind of applies to all the Pokemon. If they get some cool moves, they will certainly have an impact and potentially rise up a tier or two. Who knows? Like Scolipede, for example, if something comes and changes with them. But yeah, Victini spamming Recreate, that is definitely what I'm looking forward to again in this generation. And then we have the 5th generation, what was it called? of the Sinnoh. No, is it Sinnoh? I can't tell anymore. But the 5th generation starters, Superior with Contrary. If that thing gets released, that's gonna be really awesome to finally get to try that out. And nobody likes yet another firefighting starter. Go away, Embor. You're outclassed by Infernape. Infernape is much better. So everybody just use Infernape. Leave this pig to its lower tiers where it kind of belongs. And then Samurats. Like, it's Samurats. It's really nothing special, unfortunately. Then we got Whimsicott, which got turned into a Grass Fairy type. So now it's actually immune to Dragon types. And it has a bunch of other interesting resistances now that it's part Fairy type. So we shall see if it's going to have any sort of real impact. Like, the Fairy type certainly helps it. But the thing with Whimsicott is that coming to Gen 5, when Prankster was introduced, Whimsicott was one of the better users of it, because the Prankster Sableye wasn't released at the time, so everybody was using this thing. But then in the end, it didn't really do anything, because it has the support move pool, which, you know, you can do Stun Spore and Leech Seed and Sub and stuff like that, but then you really have no way to really retaliate. It has really pathetic offenses, you know, besides like Giga Drain, it can't really do much. It's a nice supporter, but in the end, it never really does anything. You can get some momentum going on, but it's kind of a difficult Pokemon to really abuse. That's why it hasn't seen too much usage in the previous generation. In the end, after the first initial impact that it did have when everybody was just trying out the Prankster for the sake of using it. But on the move pool side, unless it gets some new awesome moves like Baton Pass would be cool for it. Unless it gets some, other cool new moves. I'm thinking it's gonna be like, may make it to like Yu, because the Fairy typing is definitely interesting for it. But we'll have to wait and see. Then we got good old Darmanitan. That's probably gonna be facing some competition with the good old Victini again. And these two, Victini and Darmanitan, are gonna be fighting for the place of the top dominant Fire type offensive Pokemon in the underused tier. Although Victini has other options, because it can go kind of mixed. And it can go pure special, so there is that. But still, Victini spams Weak Create and Darmanitan spams Flare Blitz, so we shall see what is going to happen between those two Pokemon. Cofagrigus. Ghost type again being slightly better offensive typing this generation with the Steel Nerf. That's going to be a cool thing for Cofagrigus, but I still kind of see it in the lower tiers, UU, RU, somewhere over there. Although, like, Cofagrigus has... I really love that Nasty Plot Trick Room set. I think that's one of the best sets you can run on Cofagrigus, besides the standard supporters with, like, Will-O-Wisp. And I guess it can do Rest Talking too. And then, you know, have Shadow Ball as your one attack. But Mummy ability is kind of cool. You can play some shenanigans with that. But I think it's going to be perhaps UU, RU, somewhere over there in this generation. And then we got Jellicent, which has this unique Water Ghost typing. I would imagine this Pokemon, I don't know. I would think it would do just as fine as it did in the previous generation. Was kind of used in combination with Ferrothorn, although Ferrothorn kind of got nerfed with the Steel Nerf, obviously. So they actually no longer do resist each other's weaknesses like they used to do in the past. But Jellicent, well, another thing that kind of hurts Jellicent, I guess, is the fact that, you know, in the previous generation it was one of the best spin blockers, but now that there's defog, that's definitely an issue for Jellicent, because it cannot like come in and just spin block like it used to, because now it needs to worry about the defog users. So, but I guess that just overall hurts all the stall teams, not so much just, you know, Jellicent, the stall teams that rely on entry hazards and phasing and stuff like that. But still, it has the unique typing, solid recovery, bunch of support moves. I think that's going to be enough for it to be a top tier mon, or maybe it will. Now with all the bunch of new stuff getting introduced, it may end up dropping to UU. Who knows? In my opinion, it's still a solid Pokemon. But then we got Electros, and now with the introduction of Fairy types, Electros is the only Pokemon, besides its evolutionary line members, it's the only Pokemon that doesn't have any weaknesses. Or if you talk about Mold Breaker users, in that case it would. But otherwise, Electros is the only Pokemon that doesn't have weaknesses, because Electric is only weak to ground, and Electros has Levitate, so that's the thing. And it does have solid offenses, but its speed is really what's the big letdown. And when it comes to defensive side, it doesn't have reliable recovery. You know, it can learn Giga Drain, I do believe, but it's not really enough. It's kind of a lower tier gimmick, Electros, really. And I guess that's how Game Freak wanted to make it, because, you know, they made another Pokemon that has no weaknesses at the time, so they kind of wanted to balance it out, not make it too broken because of that fact that no weaknesses. So there is that. And then we got the Fighting Trio. Oh yes, and where is Keldeo? Somewhere probably. There's Keldeo. So we got the Sword of Justice, Musketeers, or whatever you want to call them. And mainly I believe Terrakion and Keldeo are going to have a huge impact. Virizion was a Pokemon that was kind of used to deal with rain in the previous generation at the beginning of the tiers, and then it kind of just dropped to a lower tier, and now that there's no perma-rain, there's really no place for a Virizion, I kind of feel like. So it's going to be, coupled with Cobalion, I think they're going to be like underused Pokemon again. But yeah, Terrakion spamming that awesome rock fighting coverage, that's going to be a great thing for it again. And then Keldeo, I guess the perma-rain kind of hurt Keldeo, so it can no longer spam Hydro Pumps as easily as it did in the past generations, but, you know, still gonna be a solid Pokemon. It has the Secret Sword, unique move, and a few other things, Calm Minding and subbing and running Specs and Scarf. It has a bunch of options. It's a really solid OU-mon, I would say. But then we got the, what do you want to call these guys? And why are they separated like this? I have no idea why they... What's the thing? Is Landers really supposed to be their, like, boss? Well, he is the landlord, so I guess it makes sense. But all of these, the genies and the Therian forms, definitely going to have an impact on the metagame. Can't wait to get these guys. And on Showdown, I've been already trying them out. I guess these two kind of got hurt by the nerf of Perma Weather, not being able to spam Thunder and Hurricane respectively so easily as they did in the previous generation, but still a really solid Pokemon regardless, especially the Therian forms that they have access to. Or Thundurus actually kind of works better as a regular one in the Incarnation form, because that is the one that got banned in the previous generation. But we're gonna have to see if Thundurus is gonna get banned, but I'll talk about that in a previous video. But still, Thundurus, you know, it can do the Nasty Plot, Thunderbolt, Focus Blast, Grass Knot, or HBIs, whatever you want to have for coverage, and you're pretty much set to go. And then you also got the Prankster Thunderwave, which is really useful support for your team, so that is definitely a thing for Thundurus. I think Tornadus took the biggest hit because, you know, it kind of relied on spamming that Hurricane, and now it can no longer do that. But still, the Therian Tornadus, I think that's a great Pokemon. It lives still on its own speed tier, although there are a few Pokemon like Greninja that are now higher, and also Noivern that are faster than it naturally. So that's kind of unfortunate for good old Tornadus Therian. But I think Regenerator is a really cool thing, because you can just U-turn out, and you can still try your best to spam Hurricane. And it does have like Heat Wave and Focus Blast for coverage, so really nice moves. And I guess you could try out the physical acrobatic set with a Bulk Up, although there's no Flying Gem, so that kind of hurts it. Unless Flying Gem gets released, you know, that probably doesn't get too much usage, I would imagine. But still, all of the Therian forms, nice Pokemon. I think the Landorus is the Pokemon out of the genies that took the least amount of a hit coming to Generation 6. Because it can still go physical, it can still go special. The lack of, you know, being able to abuse Sand Force, the fact that it cannot abuse Sand Force as well as it could in the previous generation with Perma Sand, I don't think it's really that big of an issue for it. And it was mostly seen with the hidden ability once that got released, Sheer Force, but it still has the ability to go mixed, and that is what makes Landorus a really dangerous Pokemon. You never really know. It's basically the fact that it can go physical or special makes it so that it's basically an uncounterable Pokemon. Because the ones that can switch into special attacks cannot switch into physical ones, and vice versa. And unless you scout for it, if you do scout, and if you make the wrong scouting move, you may end up just getting destroyed. And that's really the issue with lenders, and we shall see what's gonna happen to lenders in this generation. I don't think, like, especially defensive fairies alone can save you from getting destroyed by this monster known as lenders. And then, of course, Reshiram, Zegrom, they're gonna have their own impact in the Ubers metagame, coupled with the Kyurem White. So I guess regular Kyurem, and then Kyurem Black, they're gonna be, I don't know, I'm sure they will be struggling in the possible BL tier, because they're not that good. And now Kyurem used to have a gimmick in the Hail teams, but now it can no longer spam that Blizzard as it did in the previous gen. So I guess that's kind of an issue for it. But I think the pressure stalling sub-roosting set is still going to be a really cool thing for it. And Choice Bandit Kyurem Black is going to be spamming Outrage, although not that freely. But I guess that's in a way a nice thing, that if Fairy type comes in, Outrage will be stopped and then you can switch out. So that's the thing. It's kind of 50-50 what you want to do with that. Is that really an issue? But Kyurem Black still has that really, what, base 170 attack, is it? And spamming Outrage with that, coupled with its, well, I guess that's still the main issue. The lack of those coverage moves with it, especially that physical Ice type move. But who knows, maybe it gets Icicle Crash finally, or Ice Punch. Probably not, though. Why would Game Freak do such a thing? They won't. And then we got Mellow. It's probably gonna be, again, a lower tier gimmick, because the way it operates with the switching of the forms and stuff, I don't really see a bright future for Meloetta. Although I guess the Pirouette form, or whatever it's called, the fighting type, you know, it has like 128 speed, I believe. So it outspeeds a lot of things right there. But it's still a gimmick because of the nature how it works. So I don't really see, again, good chance for Meloetta in the higher tiers. But then last, but certainly not least, we got Genesect, and in my opinion, this thing should get banned, because it's because of its offensive capabilities. Again, there's like only Heatran that can really wall it, and one Pokemon alone is not really enough. And if you think that Fairy types can wall it, you know, you'll just get destroyed by Flash Cannon or Iron Heads. Because the thing is, Genesect can go physical and special, and now it also has the option to run like Choice Bandit Extreme Speed, so it has that priority now, and it also has Blaze Kick, so that's a thing, and Shift Gear, so it has few other options, although they're, compared to what Genesect can do, they're more gimmicky, but it still has more options than it did in the past gens, and it's still, the main thing is the Scarfer and the download, and because of download, you kind of have to specifically adjust your Pokemon's IVs so that you don't give it the special attack boost, so that it won't be able to destroy your team as easily. I believe this is where the metagame is leading with Genesect, and when it comes to development of the current metagame, in my opinion, Genesect is not healthy for the metagame, because it kind of forces you to always prepare for it, and the fact is that you just really can't, because it's just that great of a Pokemon. It works as a Scarfer, it works as a Choice Band user, it can sweep with Rock Polish special sets, it now has the Shift Gear physical one, so it can boost up with that, so it has all these different options, and the download just basically always gives it a +1. So you're always in that situation like, okay, is it going to go for that special attack? No, it just goes for the U-turn instead. It always escapes. So even if you go with Heatran, the problem with Heatran is that it doesn't have reliable recovery. So once you switch into too many U-turns, you know, it can be taken down with something like Thunderbolt later on in the game. But still, the fact is that Heatran is like the only thing that can really stop Genesect. And honestly, in my opinion, there aren't any new Pokemon that really could do it like Heatran can. So Genesect still kind of as broken as it was in the past generation. And hopefully Smogon will ban it soon. At least I'm kind of hoping for it. Maybe it will just get suspect tested again. I'm not really sure what Smogon is planning to do with it. But Genesect. If you get this Pokemon once Pokemon Bank gets released, I'm certain people will be spamming Genesect everywhere because it is just that great of a Pokemon. You can put it on every team and it will just work. It has natural synergy with everything, and it can do stuff on its own, and it can be a great momentum gainer with that U-turn and download and all the great coverage moves that it has. It's just one of the best Pokemon in the OU tier. But we shall see what will happen to good old Genesect. But now I have gone for way too long already, but I thought this was a really important topic that I wanted to talk about, so it turns out to be a long episode. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I just really liked going through all these Pokemon, like seeing like what are we going to, because right now it's a whole different meta game without these Pokemon. And once we have access to all these Pokemon, you know, a lot of them weren't that good, but a lot of them were good. And once we get access to them, it's gonna change the meta game for good, completely. And it's a whole different meta, especially if you have been playing in that Pokebank OU tier on Showdown. You can kind of tell. But who knows what mystery moves or abilities perhaps some Pokemon have gained when coming to Generation 6. Who knows? I don't think I talked about that, but there's also a chance that some old Pokemon got different abilities, like that, whatchamacallit, the Scolipede again, that got speed boost in this generation. Chandelure got Infiltrator, maybe perhaps a few other Pokemon have changed their abilities that could make them better too. Who knows? We can only find out. And perhaps if you have a Japanese friend, you can perhaps ask him or her if they would happen to know about it. Apparently on GTS there's a bunch of these Pokemon around now that you can try and trade for, because Japanese people obviously they had access to Pokemon Bank for a little bit. But definitely, as a final little note, Pokemon Bank again going to have a huge impact, and it's going to be interesting to see how the metagame is going to develop after this. And it's kind of fun that right now it's been like a couple of months since the release of Pokemon X and Y. You know, things are finally like kind of starting to find their place. But now with the release of Pokemon Bank, everything is kind of going to get revamped. Especially on the Wi-Fi scene. I guess on the Showdown, not that big of an issue because of the they already have the Pokemon Bank tier there. But certainly, depending on what discoveries people are gonna be making, are there new egg moves for Pokemon, are there new abilities and new everything for some of these old Pokemon, depending on that, a lot of Pokemon could still change and have a different impact and have a bigger impact on that note. And we don't really know until the Pokemon Bank gets released, until we have all that information. At least people on Pokemon, they are already starting to trying to gather some info from the Japanese people. I guess some of them have been doing that trading on the GTS and whatnot. But we shall find out, and hopefully Pokemon Bank will come out soon for us Europeans and also Americans and for the rest of the world, and we can all enjoy of our old precious Pokemon. But a long topic is a long topic, and I'm not sure if I'm going to split this into 2 episodes. Usually that doesn't work out. People never want to see the second episode, so I may just keep this one long episode, because it's a really important topic. So that's why I wanted to talk about it for a long, and there's so many things to go through. Perhaps I shouldn't have rambled too long like I'm doing right here. So on that note, thank you for watching. Until next time, got a bunch of good topics on my mind. It's just unfortunate that they always tend to drag out for too long. But hopefully some of you did enjoy it. Thank you so much. Until next time, this is Spade, signing out. Peace.